On today's show, the third line center position is the biggest question going into the fall. Who is the Capitals' best option? I'll discuss next on this edition of Locked On Capitals.
Your Locked On Capitals, your daily podcast on the Washington Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Well, hello and welcome into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Dan Holme. I've covered the Capitals for the past 3 seasons for Locked On and various other outlets before that. I'm also the host of the weekly show called The Capitals Minutecast, available wherever you find your podcasts. And as always, I want to thank you for making this your first listen of the day. So in this edition of Locked On Capitals, there has been a change in goalie depth within the Capitals organization. Clay Stevenson is number 3. Is he up for the task? I'll talk about that. A little bit later, we'll talk about how Hudson shines at development camp. And a lot of Capitals fans are hoping he can join the team sooner than later. Why Hudson thinks it'll be a little bit. But just to get it going here, we'll talk about Connor McMichael as he eyes that third line center position, and also questions about Roslovic. Let's dive into that in segment number 1 here, talking about the questions about the third line center in general, but specifically that third line center position. And just to get into it right away, Connor McMichael is the best option available. There is no two ways about it. That is the position that he has played before. That is the position that he prefers. And I think ultimately the position that the Capitals organization prefers that he plays. So I guess the bigger question is who is that second line left wing going to be? But if it's not Connor McMichael for some reason, who are some of the other options? Let's talk about that in segment 1 here. That is the big question out there. And we know that last season, McMichael carved out a really solid role on that second line, playing left wing with Pierre-Luc Dubois, who centered that line all year. And McMichael didn't just survive out there. He thrived. And, I would have no problem going into next season with Connor McMichael being that second line left wing. The bigger problem or the bigger question is the third line center position. Connor McMichael, that is where he has played really well, in his career. And I think that is one of the biggest positions of need on the roster. So I think the Capitals did their best to look outside of the organization and to see which players could fit the bill. But I think they probably have the best option internally. But talking about his numbers, last year, a guy that took big steps forward, put up career numbers, a career best 26 goals and 57 points. Played in all 82 games. The production was there. The consistency was there. And he showed that he can be a real top 6 option on the wings. So a good option for the Capitals, a good option for Connor McMichael is that he can play very well at either the center or the wing. And not just that, in a top 6 role, that is huge. But now the plan is to test him back at center, and not just anywhere. He's going to compete for that third line center job. And why is that? Well, we know Dylan Strome is center number 1, PLD number 2, and Nick Dowd on the 4th. That is the big question out there. And GM Chris Patrick said, and this is the money quote, it depends on the hour. We've moved him all around in our heads. He'll probably start in the middle and we'll see how it looks, unquote. That'll be interesting to see. It's, a lot of this is it's up to Connor McMichael. He is going to get that first kick at the can at that third line center position. If he nails it, I think that shuts up a lot of the people out there that are saying, well, who's going to do it? We know the answer. He's played that well. So the ball is in his court to see how he performs. But sounds like a guy who knows there's no guaranteed path. That is Chris Patrick, but wants to give McMichael the first crack at it. That I think that oftentimes when, teams try to fix problems, they feel like they need to go outside of the organization. I think some of the best options for the Capitals this season might be internally. And the thing of it is you don't have to talk Connor McMichael into that. He actually wants this. He told reporters at the end of the season that he sees himself as a long-term center. He feels more comfortable there, and that's where he believes he can make the biggest impact. And that's the thing, is if that is where he plays more comfortably than anywhere else, then let's put him there. And it's not just about comfort, it's can he actually play well there. He said, quote, "I think I want to be center for sure. I think that's where I'm most comfortable, but wherever Carbs wants me to play, I'm fine with it," unquote. That is the attitude of a player that's just like, keep me in the lineup. I think that, say for some reason, if it doesn't work, I don't think it's going to be the case, but it might. Say for some reason it doesn't work at that third line center position. I think that second line left wing position is still available for him. But that's a good teammate answer, Connor McMichael, what he gave there. But make no mistake, this is a big opportunity and one he's had to circle for a while. That I don't think the Capitals want to go into this season with questions at the third line in general, but more specifically, if they can get that really great third line center, I think you can kind of build the wing positions around it. Another player, like I talked about in the show before, is Hendrix Lapierre. Signed that 1-year bridge deal. He'll be pushing hard. Another name that's being floated out there is Henrik Rybinski. Both of these guys can skate and bring energy down the middle. I think that Connor McMichael would have to take a pretty big step back not to get that position. But with that said, in camp, I think that, like I said, Connor will get the first kick at the can, but we will get a look at Hendrix Lapierre, Henrik Rybinski, these kind of players to see how well they perform. So for McMichael to lock it down, he's got to bring it in camp. There's no two ways about it, because the coaching staff will, like I said, rotate lines until they find the right mix. And I have a feeling that we might not know for sure until they announce the final roster, when all the cuts have been made, because I think they want to take a long look. I think that they maybe jumped the gun a little bit last season with Hendrix Lapierre, and they saw how that backfired. I think they want to have it nailed down as to who is going to be. Now, where it gets interesting is an outside option. I just spoke to you about internal options, but don't count out Jack Roslovic yet. Yes, a name that I have brought up here quite often. And would he be a good fit? The Capitals reportedly showed interest per Elliot Friedman. They swung hard for Ehlers, didn't get him, circled back to Beauvillier, and now Roslovic's still unsigned. For me, I think that ship has already sailed. Otherwise, they would have made a move for him. I think that Beauvillier showed that was the number 2 option when they didn't get Ehlers. And I think that this team will take a pretty big swing and a leap of faith with the youth on this team. But as far as Roslovic is concerned, pretty good numbers, 22 goals and 39 points for the Canes last year. And what is his skill set? He brings speed, versatility, and can play both center and wing. But here's the thing that's a bit concerning. He was also a healthy scratch in the playoffs, which kind of tells you something. And I think why an internal option over Jack Roslovic would be a better idea is that unless he is taking a discount deal, something well under $2.8 million from last year, I think the Caps are leaning towards giving the kids a shot this year, as they should. We've heard for the longest time that, it's Crystal, it's Leonard, it's Miro, it's all these guys. This is the year to give it a go, and I understand that is wrought with a lot of, risk as well. Say that the youth doesn't perform. Will the Capitals then have to scramble to try to bring in some veteran depth? I think that you don't want to go down those roads of what might go wrong. You have to concentrate on what might go right and kind of just take a leap of faith. And, I know that is not kind of the way that general managers like to deal with things, especially former GM Brian McClellan, as he liked to have all of his angles covered. I think Chris Patrick will probably take a page from that book as well, see how these kids shake out and see which players are available, in camp. Say some of these players aren't panning out, get on the phone, reach out to some other teams and try to plug those holes. But I think that the youth on this team is deserving of getting a first kick at that can. They've got about 4.1 million in projected cap space and still have to fill out the roster smartly. So I think that that is the thing that they will have to do, and I have no doubt that they'll figure it out. And again, as I'm talking about the options, I still feel like Connor McMichael is the best option. I'm not ready to anoint him the third line center if that was my job, but I think that from what I've seen from him, he definitely deserves the first kick at the can, and I think he will be a great fit at that third line center in the fall. All right, so coming up here after the break, we'll talk about Hudson, how he shines at development camp, but let's not jump the gun here. He knows he's still a bit of a ways out. What's the latest? I'll discuss straight ahead. Summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're in baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game even more exciting. You're already enjoying the action. Why not make it a little bit more thrilling with FanDuel? You can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburned at the beach. I've been using FanDuel to track down my favorite matchups, and the app keeps fresh with new daily promotions. A fun way to always bet. So I'm a Nationals fan. There's probably some Nats fans and some Orioles fans out there. So, but what better way to get in on the action with FanDuel? It's easy to use, fast way to pay out, and makes even regular season games feel like must-watch events. Whether I'm placing a same-game parlay or watching a bet ride into the ninth inning, FanDuel makes it feel like I am a part of the action. And are you new to FanDuel? New customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets. Open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com to get started. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. You can find me over on Twitter. It's at DanCaps218. You can find the show on Twitter. It's at Locked On Caps. So in the second segment of the show here, we're talking about Cole Hutson and what we saw from him at Capitals development camp. To say he was impressive would be an understatement. And for the people that say, hey, the Capitals are all in on a youth movement, how about Cole Hutson in the fall? No chance. There is no rush to get him in there. And as I talk about in this segment, they're going to kind of take the Ryan Leonard approach about letting him work up to the NHL level kind of on his own terms. But what we saw from him at camp was a standout. Really showed up at development camp this summer and just flat out stole the spotlight. And if you were unable to attend, there was some video footage posted by the Capitals and some of the beat writers. Most impressive is skating, his puck handling. I understand the anticipation about wanting to see him on the team, as I'm feeling that as well. But like I said, the skating, the puck movement, and the confidence, the kid looks like he knows he belongs. And like Ross Mahoney said, the AGM, he said that, these kids they're more mature than they were years ago, that they're honest assessors like we have never seen before. And he understands that he's going to take some work. And I'm telling you, every single report out of camp said the same thing. Hudson looked like a guy ready to take it to the next step. But here's the twist. He's not making that jump yet. And it's a good thing, and like I said, as Capitals fans, oftentimes we want to see these guys go from the college level or the juniors and just jump right up to the NHL. But if you take a look at Leonard, who worked on his game at Boston College, and you saw what Andrew Crystal did for the Spokane Chiefs, that often giving these guys a little bit more time to marinate, to work on their skill, that just makes them that more well-prepared when the opportunity does arise for the NHL. What do we know is he's heading back to Boston University for his sophomore season, and honestly, the right move. We don't want to rush these guys. At the end of the day, I think that they should do what's best by themselves first. These are young guys. It's not like these are guys that are 25, 26 years old saying, hey, I'm taking my time. These are still very young players that are working on their game. And if that's their prerogative, if they want to go back to college and pursue their education or just work on their game, try to chase down a national championship, or the guys in the junior, whatever their goals are, that's their move to make, and ultimately the right move. But as far as his numbers are concerned, they were, rather glowing. 48 points in 39 games as a freshman. That is insane production from the blue line. We are talking about, and I'll talk about later, a replacement for John Carlson down the road. I don't know if that is exactly who he will be, but he will definitely be a guy of that skill set, if not better than John Carlson, of course. But Hudson himself said something I loved. He said, quote, I don't want to become a pro before I'm a pro, unquote. And that's a very honest assessment of where you're at. That, I think that years ago there was a bit more bravado, or I think that these guys tried to give, the GMs or these kind of things answers that they wanted to hear. But I think he sees his game. I think that he sees the guys around his age that have gone pro and what they have and potentially what he lacks. And that's refreshing from these young players. I really like it. And, I saw Crystal. He was talking with Mike Vogel about how he is friends with Connor Bedard in these kind of guys. And oftentimes they'll talk to each other about, hey, this is what I've noticed in the NHL. This is something you should be prepared for, or maybe something that you should work on. That it's kind of a cool thing, I guess I'm going to say, is that a lot of these younger players know each other, and they can reach out to some of their friends, teammates, players that they've played with, and say, hey, this is what they're doing right. This is what you should expect. That's what I like. But as far as his comments about not wanting to go pro before he's a pro, that to me shows maturity. That shows he knows development is a process, and he's focused on rounding out his game. But, if you just take a look at it, just from, like I said, the footage at Capitals development camp, it doesn't seem like there's a lot of work that needs to be done. But let's be real here. His offensive game is already NHL caliber. But it's the defensive read, the strength on pucks, the board battles. That's the stuff he knows he has to keep building. And, just to kind of go back to Leonard here again as well, or excuse me, Crystal, is that he was one of the last guys cut because there were things that he needed to work on. But what did we notice when he went to Kelowna and then off to Spokane? That he worked on those things, his strength, his skating, that it is definitely worth it. But it is kind of the Ryan Leonard plan 2.0. GM Chris Patrick talked about it too. He compared the situation to Ryan Leonard, said the plan is to give Hudson space, let him chase his goals at BU, and when the season ends, the push will come. So I think that there will be a push at the end of the season, perhaps, depending on where the Capitals are at. If they're making a push for the playoffs, what kind of season does he have? That there could be a chance that he joins the Capitals in the fall, or maybe not. We knew that with Ryan Leonard as well, is that we thought he was going to join. And then he said, no, I kind of talked about it with my brother and my family, and I want to play one more year at Boston College. And now he's on the team. I think it's the right tactic to take. Let these guys be ready mentally. Let them check off all the checklists in their mind about this is what it's going to take for me to become pro. It's going to benefit the player and the team. So the timeline here, it's shaping up to be this fall. Full sophomore year at BU, then a late spring decision on turning pro. That's what I have it penciled in. Again, penciled. It's not in marker. It's not a permanent thing, but that's kind of how I have it sketched out. And the thing of it is if the timing works out and BU doesn't make a deep run, I could see Hudson signing and maybe getting a taste of the AHL or even a cup of coffee with the Capitals. No rush, no panic. This is a long-term play here that at some point, and I know it's hard, we see this with the Nationals as well, that someday they're going to be really good. Just trust the process. That I think that this team with Hudson, with Leonard, with Crystal, with, all these guys is going to be truly next level. But like I talked about with Carlson, aging, Sandin, still developing, and what kind of role Chychrun is going to take in the future. The Capitals need a guy like Hudson to be that game changer. I think that Sandin, I think that Faravari, these kind of guys are the big pieces of the future, but you add Hudson into that mix as well. That is what is really exciting to me about where this team is heading, because there are some questions. Does John Carlson retire at the end of the season? TVR, these kind of things. But, if you take a look at it, if he takes the next step this year at BU and builds out another full 200-foot game, the NHL door could open very quickly. So let's see what happens at BU. Let's see what kind of numbers he puts up. Let's see where the Capitals are at, where they're at with Carlson in the contract there. A lot of questions that are kind of up in the air right now. The ball's in the Capitals' court and Hudson's. I guess it remains to be seen how this whole thing shakes out. All right, so coming up here after the break, we'll talk about the Capitals' depth in net. For the longest time, it was Hunter Shepard, who was the number 3 in the organization. But Shep Daddy, well, he's not a Capital anymore. Who is the number 3? I'll discuss straight ahead. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. You can find me over on Twitter. It's at DanCaps218. You can find the show on Twitter. It's at Locked On Caps. So in the final segment of the show, we're talking about net minding, one of my favorite topics. And we know who the big players are. The 1A, the 1B, Logan Thompson, Charlie Lindgren, and Hunter. Nope. He is now a part of the Senators organization. It is now Clay Stevenson's time to shine. And, before Logan Thompson and Charlie Lindgren and these guys got their, long contracts, Clay Stevenson was thought to be the long-term answer in net. A prototypical modern-day NHL goalie, big, moves well in the crease, a lot to like. Is he still the long-term answer? I guess we don't know. With Logan Thompson being locked up for many years, Charlie Lindgren will be here for the next few years as well. So, I guess unless one of those players gets injured, which is generally why the number 3 gets called up, it's going to be interesting to see the role that he takes. But, of course, the front runner to be the starter, the number 1 in Hershey. Quite a responsibility for Clay Stevenson. And is he up for the task? And what is the depth chart underneath of him? Let's take a dig deep into the weeds here, talking about net minding depth here. And, the Capitals just had a real changing of the guard. Hunter Shepard is gone. And he was one of the guys that I thought could be the tandem with Charlie Lindgren before they acquired and traded for Logan Thompson. Big picture, that was the right move. Logan Thompson was the right answer. I'm not afraid of going back and rethinking things. A Charlie Lindgren, Hunter Shepard tandem might not have failed, but it probably would not have been as lights out as an LT Charlie Lindgren. But the thing that we know, Hunter Shepard gone. But to take a look at his record, 2-time Calder Cup champ, Ironman in Hershey, always dependable, but now he's heading to Ottawa on a 1-year deal. And at the end of the day, happy for Shep Daddy. What kind of role will he take on in Ottawa? Is he going to be the number 3 there as well? I think there is a better chance to a certain extent in Ottawa than there was with the Capitals, but a lot of questions for that team as well. But the big thing here is it opens the door wide open for Clay Stevenson. Like I said, many people within the organization believed he was the next guy. This is his time to shine. And Chris Patrick said it straight up, quote, Clay needs a chance, unquote. I think the Capitals are at the point right now. They are going to see how the tandem of Logan Thompson and Charlie Lindgren shakes out. And, where is that a year or so from now? What kind of progress and how is Clay Stevenson handling the number 1 job in Hershey, that it is still possible that he could, join the team in a few years or so. I guess it remains to be seen. Players get traded, or, if Clay Stevenson lights it up that well in a Hershey and there's no spot for him on the team, he could also be traded and get a return. But The thing of it is, for Clay Stevenson, he has earned this one. Stevenson was Hershey's backup behind Shepard the last couple seasons, but in 23-24, he was absolutely lights out. 24, 10, and 2 record, 7 shutouts, a .922 save percentage, all-star honors. He even shared the Hap Holmes Memorial Award with Shepard. That's for the lowest team goals against in the league. So that was one heck of a tandem that they had in Hershey for quite some time. And the proof's in the pudding. You saw them in winning back-to-back Calder Cups, that it really worked well for that organization. Last season was a bit bumpier, 2.94 goals against, an .888 save percentage, but still solid in spot duty. That there are a lot of storylines to follow on the Capitals, the big team, but a lot of stories, particularly in net for Hershey and also Carolina, about who is going to be the backup in Hershey and what's the tandem going to look like for the Stingrays. He made his NHL debut against the Penguins in April. It was a 5-2 loss, but like I've said on the show, much in the same way that backup quarterbacks don't get a lot of, real game activity. I know they get activity down in the AHL, but I'm talking under the big bright lights in the NHL, that you really have to kill it, or a lot of fans think, man, this guy's not that great. All things considered, I'm not willing to be too hard on him. It was one outing, as you could point to really bad outings from Logan Thompson and Charlie Lindgren throughout the year. But Carberry liked his poise, and you could just see the tools in his tool set. But this year, he's the number 3 goalie in the organization. The first call-up, if anything happens to Chucky or LT, and if he's up for it, we got to monitor the situation in Hershey, and say he doesn't get off to a great start, or say it is a bumpy road for him, then they will pursue other options. But the question is now, who is the backup in Hershey? That leaves one big question. It's a battle between Mitch Gibson and Garin Bjorklund. Gibson signed to an AHL deal. He went 12-1 in the ECHL for the Stingrays, .933 save percentage. Just absurd numbers. Bjorklund, he's under contract with the Caps and is an RFA next summer. He went 21-4-3 in the ECHL with a .920 save percentage and a 2.02 goals against. Listen, I think that it's going to be a battle between Gibson and Bjorklund as well. Who is going to be the backup, and then subsequently how that's going to get rounded out with the Stingrays as well. But honestly, I think both of those guys deserve a look. And it's gonna be a battle between Gibson and Bjorklund, and whoever's chosen, it's gonna be a battle between them and Clay Stevenson as well. That sometimes these things, you can't. That's why I say it written in pencil, and to see how it all shakes out. Because if you take a look at the numbers of Gibson and Bjorklund, they're pretty good as well. Some of those numbers are ECHL numbers, so you have to factor that in as well. But what has held true for the Capitals for the longest time is their pipeline is full. And with some grade A talent, in particular in the net mining department, a lot to like. And if Stevenson struggles or gets called up, they need to be. They won't be too far behind. So here is the goalie depth for the Capitals organization right now. Of course, LT and Charlie Lindgren, the 1A, 1B situation. Stevenson gets the full starter load in Hershey, and then Bjorklund or Gibson battling for backup. This is how you reset the pipeline, and the organization feels really good about where it is headed. Again, some of these netminders that are a little bit, undercooked or need a little bit more seasoning, if you will, they'll probably be good to go, when the next contract is up, for Charlie Lindgren a few years from now, or, it depends on LT and how he performs. The odds of him playing out his complete contract with the Capitals is pretty low, I guess I'm going to say. But that is just the price of doing business in modern hockey, is you got to give them the term and the money. But all things considered, big picture, I think the Capitals are set up rather well in net, and the depth is what is assuring to me. If you take a look around the NHL, like I say, some teams have a hard time nailing down a great starter on the big team. Forget about a backup or what they have in the AHL or ECHL. The Capitals have an abundance of wealth and are revered as one of the better teams in the NHL as far as goalie development is concerned, have been for many years. And that is why the Capitals have always had really great options. Again, sometimes it doesn't always pan out. See Samsonov and Vanacek. But most of the time, if you look back historically, the Capitals have had really knockout netminders. All right, once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, your only daily year-round podcast covering the Capitals. And I want to thank all of you that listen on the audio side and watch this on YouTube. You are what makes this show successful. When you're done here, head on over to Locked On NHL, as they have you covered 5 days a week, available wherever you find your podcasts and on YouTube. All right, once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It is your team every day. My name is Dan Holme, and I'll talk to you again next time.